Let's talk about reinvention, which is something you've been talking about for a long time.
And you as well. You're a great reinventor. Breakdancer? What the hell? I did not expect that.
It's so much fun, reinvention. But like we're literally sitting in a place that just describes your reinvention in a big way because it's a comedy club that you own, that you regularly perform at. I've seen your videos. And I mean, years ago, I don't think anyone would have thought James Altucher would have been a stand-up comedian. And
although people were laughing at my public talks and everyone was saying to me, I remember I gave a talk in, 2008 to like 5,000 people about finance. And at the end, a couple people came up to me and said, oh, you should be a stand-up comedian. And then in 2014 or 2013, I gave a talk and a very famous stand-up comedian was right after me. And everyone came up to me afterwards and said, oh, you were so much, I'm not bragging when I say this. That's why I'm not saying his name. You were so much funny. You should definitely try this. So I tried it and it was horrific. Not that I was horrific, but just the terror was, I had been doing public speaking for 15 years at that point. The terror was unbelievable to do 5 minutes of stand-up comedy. And here I write humorously. I do public talks. I'm sometimes funny on TV. But doing stand-up in a club to a bunch of strangers, that is or was extremely terrifying. And I've always been a fan of comedy. I even worked for HBO, which is a well-known channel in the U.S. I worked for HBO Comedy for a while, and I always respected it as an art form, but I was always too terrified to actually do it. And then I felt like, oh, I could do it. Everyone says I could do it. It's just totally a different thing. And then once I realized that, and I realized I still love it, I figured, you know what? I love skill acquisition for things that I love doing, and so I really wanted to get better at this very unique art form. And so it's just been, I keep track of everything else, like my business, my writing, my podcast, my family. But this skill acquisition has become so important to me, and I've seen it reverberate into all other areas of my life as well.
How
so? It's been such a pleasure. Well, with stand-up comedy, and you've seen this more lately with the intersection between stand-up comedy and a lot of the political and public conversation about what's important in life. But with stand-up comedy, you're kind of training yourself first and foremost to observe unusual things. And so a lot of people will just live life and this is normal. You take shortcuts so that your thinking is as easy as possible. You won't notice the interesting or the unusual because it's usually not so important to notice these things. But when you start to make it a practice, like that everything around you could have the unusual in it, the world becomes a different place, and it gives you more material to think about, to talk about, to write about, to observe in yourself. And then if you take that extra stretch of, you could communicate unusual things in two ways. You could just write about it, and that's fine. Or you can put this weird punchline on it that connects it all the way back to something else, and everyone listens and they laugh because you just took something that they didn't think was unusual, you made it unusual for them, so now they're tense, and then a punchline releases the tension, so now they're comfortable with this unusual thing you brought up, and at the same time they have more knowledge if you're doing it right. Sometimes you could just tell a fart joke, and that's funny also, and that makes people laugh, and laughter is good for health. But the best stand-up comedians are taking something they find fundamentally unusual in society or in life, and they stretch it to the point of tension, and then they twist it so that everyone laughs, everyone relaxes, but they leave with something new.
What's happening when people laugh? You must have thought about this.
Yes, and there's a lot of research as well. So for me, one thing I've noticed too is that I was able to take as I learned stand-up comedy, I was able to take other aspects of my life and kind of skip the line in terms of learning stand-up comedy faster. It takes a long time to get good at this art form, but I was able to take my analytical skills that I've learned from doing hundreds and hundreds of podcasts or starting businesses or investing. You have to be very analytical, as you know, to be a good investor, to be a good writer. You have to really analyze like every word. You have to read other stories. What are they doing? And so I watch other professional comedians analyze every aspect of what they're doing. Then the benefits of a podcast, I get to have them then on my podcast, and ask them all the questions I didn't understand about their recent performances. So I'm very analytical, and I was able to bring that into my stand-up comedy skills. And part of the being analytical is understanding what laughter is. And I think what it is that millions of years ago, chimpanzees, which don't speak a normal language as we know, they would hear rustling in the bushes, and they would all jump up into the trees. And then once they realized the rustling was just the wind and not like a lion or a bear or whatever, they would start making a noise that sounded like laughter, and that would relax everybody, and they would come down from the tree. So I think that's the evolutionary roots of laughter. And so as a consequence, we've evolved so that laughter becomes this really healthy thing. The more, and there's a lot of research on this, the more you laugh, the less inflammation you have in the body, the less diseases related to old age that you have. And I think it's because our body rewards us for these times millions of years ago when we were safe. The chimpanzees that paid attention to laughter survived, and then we evolved as a result of that.
And there's a group dynamic as well, which is why they put laugh tracks in the TV shows we used to watch when we were kids. I mean, when other people are laughing, you kind of also want to laugh.
Right. And so that's a great thing too. Like when you're about to perform in front of a group of strangers, first off, every room is different. You can't do the same act twice in a row. When you walk into a room full of strangers they don't know you, and you're going on stage, and their only expectation is that you might make them laugh, and your expectation is nothing because you hope to make them laugh, but you have no idea. So you have to you have to have this. You build this skill of reading the room, which was very different when I was just public speaking. You still had to read the room, but not as much. Like I only had to read the room enough to know, okay, they're interested in this topic. Here's an approach to this topic that will keep them interested. But you have to very carefully read almost every, like if there's 1,000 people in the room, you kind of have to see each person and who's going to laugh, who's going to be a problem. But sometimes a room is seated in such a way that there's like empty spaces. You know, if the club is not crowded, and it's not just this club. I've even performed at a Comedy Store in London and all over the country and all other clubs in New York City. You know, sometimes the way people are seated will prevent laughter from going viral. Sometimes if these people are tourists from Sweden and these people are tourists from Venezuela, they might not, their laughter might not go viral. So you have to figure out how to build, literally it's called tribe building. You have to figure out how to build a tribe between these two tables so their laughter could go viral. So all of these kind of persuasion techniques, play into how you're going to get people to laugh, even if, your material is exactly the same. You have to do different things to kind of make your material work. Or you don't use your material and you just play with the audience. You have to read the room very carefully. But yeah, and the other thing is too, here's an interesting thing. If you're making jokes that are a little bit edgy, you have to make sure the women in the room are laughing, particularly if they're there with a date, because the date will look towards, is the woman laughing? So that gives me permission to laugh.
Right.
So and there's another interesting thing too, which is kids laugh 300 times a day, but the average adult laughs just 5 times a day. And because I guess we have more responsibilities, we're not just playing pranks on each other anymore. We have more fears. We deal with more stressful people. We have more stresses in our lives. So when a group of people come in to a club, and let's say you're the first act, they're not yet warmed up. Now you're asking them to laugh another 300 times. They've just laughed only 4 or 5 times during the day total. So you have to understand where you are in the lineup and where the audience is. So there's so many factors that come into play in just that one thing you said, laughter. And sometimes you have to also realize they might be enjoying the act, they might be smiling, and you might be killing it even though they're silent. And so there's just all sorts of things you have to be aware of. And then you have to be aware of, am I panicking right now because they're silent? They've been silent for 15 seconds. Am I doing something wrong? And then you have to make sure, you relax your shoulders, you slow down. The tendency when you panic is to speed up and to crouch over, but you have to do the opposite of that, and you have to be self-aware.
Yeah, you mentioned kids. Like, so I have 2 and 3-year-old boys, and they laugh all the time. I mean, they've taught me that it's just a natural human thing, but you forget. I mean, the streets of New York City, there's not people laughing all the time. So, you forget it is a really natural human emotion, and we like to see the discrepancies in things and things that resolve, and that makes us laugh. And
Yeah. So and they laugh over just the stupidest things too, which is funny. Like I like silliness on stage and trying different things. Like comedy, like any other art form. I don't like it when comedians just do the same jokes over and over again for years because they even get bored themselves saying those jokes. They're just trying now to survive rather than really engage in the art form. So you see even someone like and this is a trap for any art form like podcasting or writing or TV. Like you see J.K. Rowling, after so many Harry Potter novels, she had to reinvent her art form by writing a mystery novel. I'm sure over the years you've evolved, the way you interview and how you interview and what you're looking for in an interview, and maybe even whether or not you interview, like you started doing documentaries. So, every art form has to evolve so that you grow personally, and again, you have to always increase those powers of observation, powers of looking for the unusual, the technique of twisting something into a laugh. It's just a fascinating art form.
So about 10 years ago, I took a stand-up comedy course in London. This is before London Real. And I took it at night over like 6 weeks. One of the hardest things I ever did. I'm not naturally someone that goes on stage. I'm more introverted than extroverted by far. And I remember getting up and the guy's like, "Why do you want to be a comedian?" And I said, "If you can do stand-up comedy, you can do anything." I remember saying that because, again, like you said, you're going in front of a cold audience, trying to make them laugh. And I remember some of the things they said is that right away, they said, if you don't address your American accent in London in the first 30 seconds, you're going to die. And there was another girl with super short hair, and they said, if you don't address the fact that you look like a lesbian, you're going to die. And it was just like funny how they said that you got to at least call the elephant in the room and then break the tension and get to where you're going.
Yeah, you have to always address what the crowd's thinking.
Right.
So for instance, if they're simply ordering drinks and you're trying to talk over them, it doesn't work. You have to almost make a joke out of it. You just have to say, I hope by the end of tonight I'm as drunk as you are. Keep on ordering or something, something stupid that just calls it out, and it breaks the tension of everyone realizes you're trying to talk over these people, so you have to address the elephant in the room. Or sometimes I've done a very serious podcast, on the stage, and then immediately after there's a comedy show that I'm on. And so the elephant in the room is I was just really serious in a podcast. Now I have to tell, these jokes about something completely different. I have to address that.